define a deer fence, and you say a square mesh or hexagonal mesh fence with the mesh size of 2 by 2, this is an issue similar to an issue that Mike brought up a long time ago, that if somebody has a deer fence that's 1.5 by 1.5, now by your definition, it isn't a deer fence. I wonder if we should liberalize it by saying typically with a mesh size of 2 by 2. And also, I believe
It's
some.
approximately 2 by 2, I mean.
Yeah.
Well, I think it ought to be loosened just to say this is, representative. It's not, doesn't have to be exactly this.
Okay, I agree. Anyone else?
I'm of two minds of this, Bill.
Pardon me?
I've never become totally comfortable what we're really trying to do here, whether we're trying to regulate deer or we're trying to protect land or trying
We're
to
talking
get rid of fences.
We're talking about deer fences.
I understand that, that's what part of the premise is, but there's a lot of underlying currents. But this is perhaps just something that's a little bit cosmetic, but it seems like we're focused on the aesthetic in part of this piece of legislation. We're specifying a particular fence must be a particular color or a couple colors. Whereas all other fences could be any color. So if this is a fence ordinance, let's look at it as a fence ordinance and do it across the board. But we're going to say that all fences have to be this color that we aesthetically apparently favor, rather than only deer fences have to apply to the aesthetic
What you
standards.
don't want is the orange plastic that they use for construction, which is,
Yeah, I don't think chain link fence looks great either. I mean, aesthetically, I think that's pretty ugly stuff.
You're talking about the specific language that said the foregoing color restriction shall not apply to da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, it's
but
like
specifically applicable-
896B, I think it was.
Yeah, it's on page 7.
Yeah.
My thought of originally why that was is that typically deer fences are 8 feet, and there's more of it. But there was also discussion when that subject came up at the board meeting. I think we were in the back room. That if we did that, there would be a lot of chain link fences that would also suddenly no longer be the right color. So.
I'm okay with that.
Okay,
I mean,
well, I'm just recalling what the context of this, the color restriction that we
I
placed in
think
there,
you're right about your context.
yeah, on new deer fences was to be this kind of neutral color.
we're just talking about doing.
I mean, frankly, when I drive through South Riverwoods, I must be blind, 'cause I can't really see the darn things very much. But I don't really find them nearly as offensive as a chain link, which I can see without any aids, any being pointed out to me, anything else. Deer fences, I have to have somebody point out, oh, there's a deer fence over there. No, you're right, there is a deer fence over there. I didn't see it.
One of the things that's really troubling me is that, and I think this was highlighted in talking with some of the members from the task force, is that this board as a unit has never said, these are the 1, 2, 3, or however many questions that we are addressing, or these are the issues that we are trying to solve. I don't think we've ever really nailed those down. And this ordinance, as it is now, seems to be a compilation of things. And maybe it does answer those things that we're addressing, but I don't think we've ever really identified those. And I'm uncomfortable enacting an ordinance without knowing exactly what it is, why I'm enacting it. What's the purpose for it?
Would you like
And perhaps there's more than one purpose, but I think it's important to know for all of us to agree on what that purpose or purposes are,
What would you like?
Well, I'm just wondering if the plan commission.
You're not making any sense.
Well, the plan commission
We
is.
spent a year on this, and if you don't know
No,
what we're here for.
that is not true. I did not spend a year on
That's
this.
what I said.
The board has
The
not
investment
spent
of
a year.
time is irrelevant, sunk cost.
I'm just wondering if we
I
can
wanna do it the
clarify
right way.
the purpose clauses. The purpose clauses at the beginning of the ordinance
I know,
were there because of the work we did at the plan commission.
That's
right.
correct.
I'm just wondering, I mean, obviously, they do go in different directions, so there isn't a single purpose. And if you look through them, one purpose is a traditional avoiding the negative adverse effect of one property owner on another.
Mhm.
One purpose is to make sure sure that we provide for visibility so people don't use fencing in a way that blocks, traffic when you're looking. I mean, those are not our main purposes, but they're also part of the purposes. But you could look at this and say, yeah, there's a lot of different purposes. One, to prevent visual blight. That's a common theme in fence ordinances. Whether we've addressed it the way the board wants is a different question, but it is a common theme. The plan commission and, at least some percentage of residents were looking for ensuring passage of deer. I tried to recognize the opposing views on what really is happening with deer by getting rid of language about channeling the wildlife, but I think there were a number of people that expressed a sentiment about trying to regulate, and that primarily goes to fence height, because everyone acknowledges you could have 6-foot fences, but the idea was to leave some area where wildlife could pass. We had problems with stormwater runoff in the past, and we found fences that were interfering with drainage. So unlike our current ordinance, this ordinance tries to say, don't put your fence in the drainage channel. Again, I know that that's not been the subject that's really been dividing the board, but looking at just the sort of the standard listing of purposes that we tried to come up with at the Plan Commission, preserving the character of the neighborhood, preserving open space, and even then we added in facilitating the rejuvenation of woodland areas, which is a theme that many people here kept mentioning was one of the purposes of deer fences. I mean, if you ask me, I would say if I were defending the ordinances, whether it was a valid exercise of police power, these are valid purposes. And the ordinance doesn't have to be focused on one of them.
That's not my.
It can be focused on all of them.
Okay, can
That's
I
not
try
my
to
issue.
answer that maybe, perhaps? The problem that we have is that the village never had a comprehensive ordinance regulating fences. That's not to say deer fences, that's not to say chain link fences, that's not to say shiny plastic fences. The village needed a comprehensive ordinance to regulate all kinds of fences. The issue of deer fencing, which is the issue that the board seemed to get stuck on the most, I certainly did. I know the task force worked hard on, is one piece of a comprehensive ordinance. Said comprehensive ordinance dealing with all kinds of fencing within the village. And if we want to talk about what is the purpose of this ordinance, it is to have a framework by which the village can regulate chain link fences, wood stockade fences, deer fences, plastic fences, all kinds of fences which will go up, have gone up within the village. And we didn't have an ordinance, it was part of the building ordinance, and it was very, I don't like to use the word loosey-goosey, but it was. And we really didn't have a comprehensive ordinance which addressed all issues of fencing. And this ordinance was proposed not solely or wholly as a deer fence ordinance. It was to give the village a comprehensive ordinance with all kinds of fencing that go up, proposed fencing and whatever. We have focused primarily on the issue of deer fences because that's the issue that people are most emotional about.
And what happened was people were putting up deer fences, and more people were putting up deer fences without permits, so we had to address it.
And yeah, so at that point it became, okay, if we have to address the issue of deer fencing, we need to address all of the issues with regard to fencing, which is what this ordinance does.
I think it's-
We're losing focus when we focus on the one section about deer fencing and say, why are we having this, what is the issue? The issue is that as we have ordinances with regard to building, as we have ordinances with regard to setbacks and height, and all of the other things that the village regulates, we needed an enforceable, comprehensive ordinance with regard to fencing. And that's what this is, and that was the purpose that drove